Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Hannon.
Hi.
I'm doing good today. We had a busy day. We were out, which was great.
Okay, so please state your full name.
My full name, Odessa Hannon McGrady.
Where and when were you born?
I was born on September the 1st, 1926, in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Who were your parents?
Gertrude King and Thomas E. Hannon, Sr.
Describe your house growing up.
I grew up in what was called the ghetto of Pittsburgh. We lived in a 3-story building on the 3rd floor. One of the things, it was in the Hill District of Pittsburgh. It was across from our public school, Morehouse Public School. And one of the things I remember was we had what was called a party bath. That meant we shared the bathroom with the people who lived on the 2nd floor, and we were on the 3rd floor.
Where was the bathroom? On the 2nd floor?
On the 3rd floor. The bathroom was on the 3rd floor, which meant my mother had me put a note on the door that says, "Please take turns in cleaning the bathroom."
How old were you when you did that?
I was about 8 or 9 when that was my job, to clean the bathroom every other Saturday.
What was your neighborhood like when you were growing up?
It was full of kids. And there was this one lady I remember, her name was Miss Boston. And she would sit at her window and say to the children, "Don't do this. You're going to get in trouble there. Go home." And she would always tell us what to do.
What about the other kids? Were there any bullies, for example?
Well, we didn't call them bullies back there. There were kids that were mean, because there was this one girl who would chase me home every day from school.
Why? Do you know why?
I don't know why she did it. But then one day, she caught me and I couldn't run, so I bit her.
Hannon used to bite.
Yeah, I was a biter too. That must be where I got it from.
Well, were they all black kids or?
No, we lived in a multiracial neighborhood. There were Jewish kids, Italian kids, Irish kids, and it was during World War II. And one boy, his name was Albert Scanlon. He came to live with his relatives. He was from Poland during the war, and he could not speak English. So our teachers taught him how to speak English, and he went on and he graduated from high school with us. I remember him. And he would tell us stories of living in the old country.
What kind of stories would he tell?
About how hard it was for children growing up under Hitler. Because he was a Polish immigrant.
So this was like the late 30s?
The late 30s, early 40s.
Are there any other kids who stand out in your memory?
Albert, because he was from another world, really. And the rest of the kids I knew from church or growing up. There was one boy, and I don't remember his name, but he had to practice his violin every day. And I thought one day, I wonder if he became a good violinist. Because every day he practiced for at least a couple of hours. And then there was another guy. I think his last name was Kelly, and his father had the brewing company, the beer company.
Who is your best friend?
Her name was Annie Robinson. She lived across the street from me. Years later, I had an opportunity to see her in Pittsburgh. My sister had found her, and I went to visit her. And one of the things I remember about Annie was her mother always sat down and had a book in her hand. Her mother read all the time. And so I remember getting a love for books from Mrs. Robinson.
What kind of things do you remember doing with Annie?
We would just walk to the store, walk to the park, walk to school together. Nothing special.
What about any games you used to play?
I don't remember playing a lot of games. I did have a Shirley Temple doll. Every girl had a Shirley Temple doll. And every girl had Shirley Temple curls.
Everyone had their hair in ringlets?
In ringlets. You're always dressed like Shirley Temple.
What other movie stars do you remember from that time?
The cowboy movies. Because on Saturday, you could go when the movie theater opened at 12, and you could sit there all day long and watch the movies. Stay in the movie all day long. Fall asleep, watch another movie, fall asleep, and just watch movies all Saturday.
How much did the movie cost?
A big 10 cents.
But they didn't have segregated seating in the movies.
Not when I was growing up.
So you could
We
sit
went down to the theater on Center Avenue and see the movie.
How'd you get there? You walked?
Walked.
Probably car. Oh, walk. How far was it?
Not far. Right down the hill. Another thing I really enjoyed was going to the library. We had a Carnegie library around the corner. And we could go and we could check out 3 books at a time. And I loved to read.
What books did you?
Mama,
Ooh,
I'm
okay, I'm
doing
sorry.
this.
I know. Okay, go on.
I was about to ask that.
I know, because it's a natural question. Go for it.
What kinds of books did you like to read?
Books that had happy endings. And stories that always had happy ending. I didn't like cowboy and Indian books.
Do you remember any specific authors?
Offhand right now, no. Oh, A Tree that was later on. They were like The Little House on the Prairie. Stories like that.
What was your first school like?
My first school was Morehouse Public School. I graduated from there in the 6th grade. Then I went to Fifth Avenue High School, and from the 7th through the 12th grade.
Was that segregated?
Not to the sense, it was not a segregated school because I had white classmates, but we segregated ourselves because we stayed in our own little groups.
What about the Polish boy you mentioned?
He graduated from high school with us.
But did you spend time with him?
Not a lot of time, only in school. After school, everybody went their separate ways.
And what about high school?
High school was the same way. I had a group of friends that we hung together. But then I had white friends too.
Do you think you matured and that's why you were able to befriend people outside your group?
Yes, but we did not per se like visit each other's homes outside a certain group.
What activities did you participate in high school?
I did a little swimming. I liked reading. And I really wasn't allowed to do much after school activities because you had to come home.
Come home to do what?
To be in the house before it was dark.
Okay. And did it get dangerous when it was dark, or?
No, it was your parents expected you to be in the house. When the street lights came on, that was your clue to get in the house.
What sort of chores did you have to do around the house?
I had to scrub down the steps weekly. I had to help do the ironing. I had to do the dusting of the window sills and the furniture.
Now, weren't you in like a jitterbug dance group?
I joined a group. It was called the Rhythm Kids, and every Saturday for 15 minutes they were on the radio.
You danced on the radio?
No, you sang.
Oh, you sang.
I never got an opportunity to do a solo part, but it was part of the group. It was called the Rhythm Kids, and it was the one song I remember: a tisket, a tasket, pennies from heaven, songs like that.
And how old were you when you were doing this?
About 10 to 11.
What radio station? Remember?
KDKA was the oldest radio station in the United States,
Mm-hmm, that's the first
and it was the first one, and it was in Pittsburgh.
So, did you have any brothers or sisters?
I had one sister, an older sister, and two younger brothers, JJ and Junior, and my sister was Eva Mae. And I tried my best to be like Eva. She was what you would call a really good girl and a good student. She studied hard.
So she was your idol
Mentor.
and mentor. What was it like growing up with all those children
It was really tight because we lived in 2 rooms. My sister and I slept on a fold-out bed. You'd pull it out at night, and then you'd put it up in the morning, and it looked like a little chest. And I slept at the foot, and she slept at the head, and her feet were always in my face. And my brothers slept with my mother in the big bed. And I remember during the flood of '36 that came through Pittsburgh, we were all in this one bedroom, and Mother said we would all, if we float down the river, we'd all go together.
This is just going back to the brothers and sisters. When were they born and when did they die?
My sister was born in 1924, November of 1924, and she died in 2002. My baby brother, JJ, was born in 1930, and he died in 1992.
What did JJ stand for?
James Joseph. My older brother, Thomas E. Hannon Jr., was born in 1928, and he died in 1996.
Thomas Edison Hannon.
Yes.
Where did you go to college and what was it like?
I went to Tuskegee, in Tuskegee, Alabama. When my mother was one of the oldest of 14 children, and she would talk about Tuskegee, and she wanted to go to college. But because she was the oldest, they couldn't let the older child go. because she had to help with the younger children. So she really interested me in Tuskegee and Booker T. Washington and George Washington Carver.
What was it like at school?
I was 18 in September of 44. I took a Greyhound bus from Pittsburgh to Tuskegee, Alabama. And the thing was, I was not scared. I was not scared. And I had to make at least 5 or 6 changes. When we got to Columbus, Ohio, I met this girl who became my roommate. Her name was Mary Shackelford. She was from Washington, Pennsylvania. And we became close friends. We were taking the same course, commercial dietetics.
How long did it take to get there?
Forever, because the bus, and it was segregated going down. After we left Wheeling, West Virginia, it was segregated. And sometimes we had to get off the bus because there was no room for us. But we made it to Tuskegee in about, I'd say 3 to 4 days. I don't know.
So what did you do when you had to get off the bus? And
You waited in a colored waiting room. And one of the dumb things that I did, my mother's neighbor had made me some sandwiches to take. And I didn't want anybody to see me eating the sandwiches, so I threw them away. When I got to Tuskegee, I was so hungry. Yes.
Why didn't you want anyone to see you?
I don't know what was wrong with me then. Homemade sandwiches, and they were good.
So once you got to school, what was that like?
It was good, and I thought when I got to school, I went to register, and I thought I had enough money to register and some leftover money, but I didn't have enough money. And so I called my brother, Tom, in Pittsburgh and said I needed $30 more. And he gave me his paper money. He sent it to me so I could register.
paper money?
Yeah, he had a paper route. Back then, the Pittsburgh Courier, no, the Pittsburgh Gazette, he had a paper route. And the papers were 3 cents. The newspaper got 2 cents and he got a penny. And he was always industrious and he saved his money. That helped me out a great deal.
Can we talk about your first crush?
I don't remember. Oh, I know who he was, yeah. His name was Harold Wilkes, and he was a neighborhood boy. And all the girls loved Harold. We had a nickname for him, but I don't remember. He was a good-looking kid, and he knew it. He was cute. He was a boy, and all the young ladies, all the young girls fell in love. That must have been about 12, 13 years old. Yeah.
What did he look like, Mom?
I don't remember what he looked like now that I think about him. And I don't remember seeing him in later years after I came back to Pittsburgh from school. No, I don't remember. There were other women who influenced my life other than my mother. My Aunt Katie, I used to watch her children. My Sunday school teachers who had an impact on my life. And there was one teacher in particular. Her name was Mrs. Hudson. At Christmas, she invited all her Sunday school kids to her house. And it was the first time that I had fruitcake. And I remember that. And it was the first time I sat at a dining room table. And I thought that was so cool. And we were all dressed up in our Sunday school best to go to Mrs. Hudson's house. She really impacted my life as a teacher, as a Sunday school teacher, teaching the word of Jesus Christ. And I remember her fondly. And she was the only lady in our neighborhood who had a husband. I remember him. But he sat in the living room or in the bedroom and he was always quiet. I don't know if he was sick or what, but he was always quiet.
What about some other women who influenced you?
Oh, there was Mrs. Helen Hunt, who was the superintendent of our Sunday school. She was always nice to me. And there was another lady named Mrs. Maggie Eisenhower. And years later, when I went off to Tuskegee, I met her family at Tuskegee, which was nice. Somebody I knew back home that was nice to me. And there was Miss Anna, our neighbor, who for 10 cents on Saturday, I scrubbed down her stairs, and I got a whole dime every Saturday. That was one of my chores, and she would give me a whole dime to do it. Yes.
What'd you do with your dime?
Well, we went to the Saturday matinee, my brother and I. But out of that dime, I had to give my mother a nickel. We always had to give mother something from what we made. And so that was letting her know that we were responsible and that we helped to support the household.
What other ways did you earn money?
Running errands, going to the store for different people. And that was it. But there's one story, I don't know if this should be in there or not. But this is about my mother and how the people in the community in our neighborhood loved my mother. We lived, I think I told you that we lived in a 3-story cold water flat with a party bath. One night, and we all slept in one room. And one night, there was a knock on our door, and it was Miss Maisie was her name, the lady that lived below us on the 2nd floor. And she wanted to come in. Well, I didn't know the story at the time, but Miss Alberta lived next door, and Miss Alberta looked like Bess from Porgy and Bess, good looking, boyish bobbed hair, fishnet stockings, the high heel shoes, and every night about 6:30, she went out, all dressed up. I didn't know where she went or what she did, but rumor had it that she was as my mother called it, a high stepper. So she was doing her high stepping. Well, this one particular day, Miss Alberta's husband or friend promised Miss Maisie a box of candy that he was going over to the U.S. Steel Mill and get his check and bring her some chocolate. Why these two ladies got in a fight, I don't know. But Miss Maisie picked up a butcher knife and stabbed Miss Alberta until she was dead. And that night, on our at our door was Miss Maisie and a detective, because they had come to arrest Miss Maisie. And Miss Maisie told the detective, I have to go see Miss Hannon. I have to go see Miss Hannon. And we were all supposed to be asleep, but I was nosy. I wasn't asleep. Miss Maisie and my mother got behind the door, and there was a trunk there. Miss Maisie was going to jail, and she had no underwear on. So she didn't want to go to jail without underwear. She didn't want those people checking her without underwear. And my mother only had her good pair on, the only good pair that she had. So she stepped out of her underwear, and Miss Maisie stepped in them. And Miss Maisie went on to jail. So
That is a great story. That just might be the best thing I've ever heard.
And you remember we went to Mobile and you asked Grandmother, you said, I want to see your underwear.
That was a good friend. You get somebody your best drawers off your butt.
Mm-hmm.
They say you take the shirt off your back. That
Take the drawers
take
off
the
your
drawers off your
behind.
behind. That's a good friend.
But Miss Maisie did not want to go to jail with no
No undies.
undies. And she was only sentenced for 6 months.
She killed a woman?
Self-defense.
Did Granny get her drawers back? Miss Maisie should have bought Grandma some more drawers.
Seriously.
Some good
What
ones.
a whole outfit.
Oh, when Miss Maisie got out of jail, that's the first place she came to see us.
Mm.
Now, Miss Maisie, was she the high stepper? Or
Miss
Miss
Alberta was
the
a high stepper.
Okay.
Isn't that a nice way to put it?
Yes.
She's the high stepper.
Say she was a prostitute.
So, I would assume that the reason they got into a fight was because Miss High Stepper maybe stepped a little too high with Miss Maisie's. You mentioned a husband or a friend.
Yeah, Miss Alberta had a friend too. And the friend promised to bring her some candy. And they argued, my man's bringing you something, how come, like that.
Get killed over a box of candy.
But Miss Maisie, Miss Alberta, always had those peekaboo blouses, those little black skirts, those fishnet stockings, and them high heel shoes. And her hair was bush bobbed and the long gold earrings.
Mm.
She looked good.
I wanted to ask you a bit about the Depression. I guess just if there's something that pops into your mind, or I can ask more specific questions.
I really, I went through the Depression because everybody did.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't know I was in a depression. I was a kid, and everybody wore hand-me-downs, and everybody ate beans, and nobody had anything. But I thought that was the way of life. I didn't know. I was never hungry. I was never in a soup line, because we always had something. My mother was good at making a meal from nothing. She could take a pot of beans. For instance, we'd have a bean every night of the week. And then she'd have a little bit of this bean and that bean. And then one day she'd put them all together and cook them. And so when people started talking about 14 bean soup, I said, I had that. There was nothing new to me. But I was never hungry. I did not like oatmeal. Oatmeal was not as delicious as it is today. It was old-fashioned oats, and it took longer to cook. And no matter how hard my mother tried, it was lumpy. And in those days, you had to eat what was put in front of you, or you didn't have anything else. So I learned to eat the oatmeal with the lumps. But we used to fill it up with sugar. And that wasn't good either. But that was one way of getting it down. So your morning started with a bowl of oatmeal and milk, canned milk, because fresh milk was expensive. And we used canned milk mixed with water.
And what about for lunch?
For lunch, it was a bologna sandwich. I remember a bologna sandwich for lunch between 2 pieces of bread. And Mother would make what we call syrup bread, which was really gingerbread. And you had a big slab of that. And a glass of water. And you went on your way.
So what did your mother do for a living?
She did housework. My mother had limited education, and so she did housework by the day. She would go have a job in somebody's house. Mother preferred laundry to cleaning, and they would go to this lady's house and do the wash the clothes in the morning, put them on the line to dry, and then in the afternoon she would iron the sheets and things and come home. And her pay was $2 a day and car fare, which amounted to $2.25. They gave her a 25-cent for car fare to ride the streetcars to get to their houses.
And what type of people could afford to have their house cleaned by someone else during the Depression?
Those were people who had a little bit more of an income. One of the ladies my mother worked for, her family was part of the Maytag washing machine family. I don't know where they were in the family, but this lady had girls around our age, and we got to wear their old clothes. She'd bring their old clothes home, and that was good. My first girdle, my first bra was another girl's bra and girdle.
Now, what is a girdle? I've never known.
It's an undergarment to make your
Shape
shaping garment.
Oh, okay.
So like to hold your stomach in. And
Okay, and what about your father? What did he do?
My father died at age 30. He worked in the Jones and Laughlin steel mills. And it was in those days, back in the 30s, the work conditions were poor. They had no health regulating sanitation or working conditions. My father caught pneumonia and he died of a lung disease. Very dirty work, similar to what coal miners do today, but coal miners have better health regulations than in the days when my father was working.
how old were you when he died?
I was about 4, I think. Yeah. Because my mother was pregnant with her 4th baby. My mother took my father's body back to Alabama to be buried. My mother and father were from adjoining towns. So after my father was buried, my mother went to her family, and she stayed there with her mother and father and brothers and sisters and had her baby. And when her baby was 6 months old, she came back to Pittsburgh.
Where were you and the other children?
We were with my mother.
Oh, so she took you all back to Alabama.
Took us all back to Alabama.
And you were there for 6 months?
After the birth of my brother. The mother came back to Pittsburgh, and she got a job in the laundry of Passavant Hospital. It was a hospital in our neighborhood where she could walk to and from.
Who watched the kids?
A lady would come in and get us up for school. One of the ladies in the neighborhood. Back in those days, everybody helped one another to survive.
So there was no government assistance?
Eventually, we got government assistance called Widow's Pension. My mother received $50 a month, and that's how we were raised.
How did you get along with your siblings with only two rooms in the house, especially when
It was
you
hard.
became a teenager?
We each had a dresser drawer and where we could keep our personal things. And I used to go to the library and bring my books home and stick them in my dresser drawer so I knew where they were. That was my personal belongings, my little hangout where anything that I liked, I put in this dresser drawer.
And what were some of the items in there?
A pair of earrings, some cheap jewelry that maybe somebody gave me, my underwear, my books that I was reading, and I saved my pennies in this drawer.
And where were you getting these pennies?
If I went to the store for a neighbor, she would give me a penny or two, and I would save it till I could get 10 cents, and then I could go to the movies. Yes. Growing up in Pittsburgh, I grew up like during the Depression. I thought everybody was the same. I didn't know I was really going through a depression. And when I started 7th grade at 5th Avenue High School, they had a cafeteria. And for 10 cents, you could get a decent lunch, a hot lunch. Well, I didn't always have 10 cents. So on those days when things were rough, and I didn't realize that there were other girls, they didn't have 10 cents either. So sometimes we'd stand in the hall during lunch hour, and one day, I don't know why, I had a biscuit sandwich. I had made it at home and put it in my pocketbook. And so, this particular day, I went into the ladies' room and ate my biscuit sandwich sitting on the stool. I did not want anybody on the outside seeing me eat a biscuit sandwich when everybody else had white bread. The funny thing about it, as I think about it now, I would come out and some girl would say, "Oh, you didn't eat lunch today." I said, "Oh no, I never eat lunch." And there were probably biscuit crumbs around my mouth. I often think about how ashamed I was or how inferior I felt to other people because they had a little bit more than I did, not realizing that homemade biscuits were a good thing back then. So that they were so good you could eat them cold. Yeah, that was funny.
So I'm looking at a picture of you from college, and who's this boy you're with?
Oh, I thought he was a dream guy.
Do you remember his name?
Hubert T. Alexander.
And how did you meet?
In the cafeteria. We both worked in the cafeteria.
Did he reciprocate these feelings?
I don't know. He liked all the girls. All the girls liked him.
Yeah, I know what those boys are like. We've talked about your college friends, your college roommate, but who were your other friends?
When I went to Tuskegee, I met a girl from Corning, New York. She was in my class. Her name was Mildred Watkins. And today we're still friends. She lives in Tuskegee with her second husband. Her first husband died, and she married a boy from Corning. And then I was a big sophomore, and I met another friend, and her name was Jackie Cox. And today, Jackie lives in Corning, and we're still friends. Your mother and her daughter are the same age.
And how old is that? Just for the record.
59. And her daughter, Andrea, was born on your birthday.
Which is February 23rd.
I never thought I would be coming to Corning to live. But we had a program it was called the Antioch Plan, where you'd work 3 months, save your money, and go back to school. Well, Jackie stayed out of school, and got us involved with a plan at the hospital, Corning Hospital, where we would work in the dietary. And we stayed at Jackie Cox Curry's mother's house at 185 East 4th Street. And so I was about ready to go back to college. It was in May, for my senior quarter. And another lady, I had met her son at Tuskegee, had invited me to the Friendship Baptist Church. And after church, everybody would go to Mrs. Thompson's house she had the young people hang out. And on this particular Sunday, I met my future husband. He came in with his girlfriend, Shirley. She was from Watkins Glen. And something jumped in my chest. I don't know what it was. And so the next day he called me.
Even though he had a girlfriend.
He had a girlfriend. 2 weeks later, he gave me an engagement ring.
And when were you married?
I went back to college. I graduated. And the following year, September 17th, 1949, we were married at my home church in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Central Baptist Church. Back in those days, we lived with my husband's family. We had a bedroom, and we lived at, it was 84 Roberts Avenue then, and we lived there.
And so that's how you ended up in Corning, living in Corning.
That's how I ended up living in Corning.
Describe each of your children.
Evelyn Jean. Jean was born in 1950, and then we bought this house August of 1953 from a landlord, a guy who built it.
And this house what's the address here?
38 Tuxell Avenue.
So you've lived here as long as your second daughter has been alive?
Yes.
Yeah, so I was born at Grandpa's house?
Yes, the first 2 children were born at Grandpa's house.
Okay, so you were describing Aunt Jeannie.
She was smart. beautiful baby, at least I thought so. She grew up in Corning, and then 3 years later, Charlene came, 1953. 2 years later, Margaret was born, 1955. 2 years later, Karen was born, 1957. And then I thought I was home free. 5 years later, 1962, Valerie came. And then 4 years later, 1966, Chantel was born.
Okay. Can you describe each of them, starting with Charlene?
Charlene was different. She was always inquisitive. She had to. One thing about Charlene is we take her to the grocery store, and she was always putting something in the grocery cart that I couldn't afford. And we ended up buying it because Charlene wanted it. And all the girls were really a joy in their own way. Yes.
The next daughter? Who's the next one after you?
Margaret. Margaret, from a young girl, always wanted to act. She was always on stage. And she would write, be the performer, and she would do everything there was to do in a play. She would do it all herself. She loved to act. And Karen, they called her Miss Marie, and they would put a towel around her like she was wearing a cape and made her a princess. And she still acts like she's a princess today. Valerie came 5 years after Karen. And Valerie, I think we just spoiled her. Valerie had all those other sisters who were really her mother, her and Chantel. They had me as a mother and their sisters as mothers. So they had an advantage that the other kids didn't have.
And I think both Jean and Mommy have a sort of different way of caring for people, but they're both very maternal in a certain way.
They are. Well, they had a lot of experience with their siblings. Yes.
Jean is the more nurturing, I think, and Mommy is the more, I don't want to say disciplinary, but she's the one who keeps you in line. We'll say.
Yes, she always did that.
Mm-hmm. Can you describe some time?
She was. It was either right or wrong with Charlene. There was no in between. You either did it or you didn't. And there was no excuses. She didn't believe in excuses, and you either did it right or you did it wrong.
And what about Jean? Was she more?
Jean was a little bit more compassionate. Well, Chantel came 33 days after my 40th birthday. I was shocked. I call her I don't know how she slipped in there. But at that time, they were doing abortions, and they had all this other stuff. But it never occurred to me to do anything. And I was afraid that maybe she would not be mentally right or whatever. But I accepted the fact that I was with my sixth child, and she grew up to be a blessing.
And how would you describe her, the baby of the family?
She's more aggressive than the rest of them. She got an opportunity to do things that the older girls didn't do. My husband would not let the older girls compete in contact sports. Chantel got an opportunity to do all that.
What sort of sports did she play?
Little League,
Cinderella.
Baseball, and stuff like that. And she became aggressive and competitive, which has helped her with her career today, I think.
What was it like growing up in a house with 6 girls?
Well, 7 if you count me. My husband always said he had veto power. Whatever wasn't right, he could veto it. It was funny. It was difficult. You never could find the socks, the underwear, everything. You had to take care of your own stuff, you know. But they did okay. When we moved into the house, it was a 2-bedroom house. And as the family grew, the house grew. The older girls had their bedroom, and then Margaret had a little room, and the 3 younger girls shared a bedroom together, which I think made them a little closer. The 3 younger ones are really close to each other.
Did Grandpa want any sons? Was he kind of disappointed that he got all girls?
I think so. We named Charlene because I don't know if he thought the second one would be a boy or not. I don't know. But our doctor would say to Charlie, "You can't change the pattern. You can't change the pattern. What's wrong with you?" And I remember when Sherman Curry was born and Hannon McGrady was born. Charlie was on Market Street, and John Driggins stopped traffic on Market Street and said, "Well, Charlie, you still don't know what to do."
It's funny that Mommy ended up as Charlene, which is close to Charles, when she's the one who looks the most like him.
She does. And she acts like him.
Oh, not that much.
Oh, could you describe some of the ways that they're similar?
Opinionated. It's their way or the highway.
Mm-hmm. How has Corning changed since you first arrived?
Well, the Erie Railroad used to run through this area. It's no longer there. Corning Glassworks was the main industry, and it's still the main industry, but there are other companies. Market Street had all the little stores, and everybody knew each other. Today, I can walk Market Street and see people that I don't know. In the old days, I knew the Girl Scout leader. I knew their teachers. I could go to the school and walk in and say, "Hi." They said, "Hello, Odessa." And you could go right into the office and have your needs met. Where today it's different. It's more of a bigger city now than it used to be. When I was having my babies, I would go to the front of the hospital, and then somebody would say, "Odessa's on her way to maternity." Nobody cares. Well, not that they don't care. It's so many people and so much paperwork. If you get up there, you get up there. But somebody would meet you. "Come on, Odessa, I'll take you up," you know. And you could call your doctor, and he was, "All right, I'll be there in a few minutes." We've made progress in a lot of ways, because we had a 40-bed hospital. Now there's more, and there's just more to share than we had before.
What about the black community? How has that changed?
The black community was on the hill before I came. It was situated around Harvey Street. And then they moved to Tuxell and Roberts Avenue. And some still stayed on the hill. But for the most part, it became a community of blacks. But it was a good community of blacks because they helped one another and they cared about one another. And if one had a big farm, they shared. And if one needed, they gave. And so they had several black churches that would help each other. And so it became a community that cared for one another, and they loved one another, and they helped one another.
Do you remember any specific neighbors?
Mommy and Hootie Boy. They lived 2 houses down, and they helped me raise my girls. She showed me how to fry chicken, how to do little tasks that I didn't really know. And then there were Mommy Holmes and Miss Sweats. They helped me with church work, so they would show you what to do and how to do it. And you listened to them because it was like listening to your own parents. Yes.
Any others?
Yeah, Mrs. Thompson, Reverend and Mrs. Jones, the McGradys. Everybody it was a big family. And they would have parties and picnics and do things together.
Well, so now you're one of the old ladies in the community.
Now I'm the old lady in the community. The Fishers are on the hill. Deacon Fisher would take the kids to church in his Cadillac or Lincoln. And when he started, Charlene was so little, he would have to stop his car, get out and pick her up and put her in. And back in those days, there were no seatbelt laws. And he could pile as many kids as he wanted in the car. Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk any more about the church? Because I know that's a pretty important part of your life, and it has been.
The church is an important part of my life. I became I taught Sunday school when I was at home, and I was a church clerk in Pittsburgh. So I grew up in the church, and when I came, it was only natural for me to join the Friendship Baptist because it was my husband's family church.
Founded by his mother, right?
No, founded by the people that came from Troy, Alabama. Mm-hmm.
And what sort of activities did you do when you in the Friendship?
Well, I worked with the youth, the children, and I taught Sunday school. I sang in the choir. And so, back in those days, you would make your own fun. You'd have your own program. And everybody in the church would be on the program. And then we had what we call annual teas and birthday parties. Mm-hmm.
Do you want to describe your work life a bit?
My workplace.
Yeah, the jobs you had.
Well, when I first came to Corning, after Jeannie was born, I went to work for Corning Glass. And then, next thing I was pregnant. After Charlene came, I didn't go back to work. But after Margaret, they were building a new Woolworths store. And I went to work for Woolworths as a pastry cook. And I worked there until after Chantel was born.
So what did you do? What were your hours at Woolworths?
From 6 to 12. And that way I was home with the kids, and I could go to the school meetings and things like that, which was a good job for me.
What did you make?
We made apple pies, donuts, all kind of pastries. In fact, Woolworths had the reputation of having the best pastries in Corning. Yes.
I think Mommy told me about you meeting the girl that you worked with at Woolworth years later. Can you tell that story?
When you and Jackie took tea to the old folks.
Oh, yeah. My friend Jackie Cox Curry is really good with seniors, and she tries to help people. So once a week or once a month, she goes up to Three Rivers Nursing Home, and she would have a tea. And there in the nursing home was some of the ladies that I knew from Woolworths. Yeah. And they remembered the good times at Woolworths. Yes. And Jackie would would bring her silver and her china and make it nice for the ladies so they can remember a little of home. After Woolworths, it was 1966, I was sitting at my kitchen table and Sammy Young said, "Have you considered Ingersoll Rand?" I said no. So he brought me an application. I filled it out, and the woman personnel lady called me. So I went to work for Woolworths. For Ingersoll Rand. And stayed until the late 80s. Chantel was still in high school, and I really wanted to work a little longer. And then I was reading a newspaper, and it said, "Nutrition teaching assistants needed in the Corning area." I called, and I went up for an interview up at Steuben County, Bath, and I got the job. And I stayed there until 1999, going into homes, helping young families with nutrition. And I loved it because nutrition was my first love, helping young girls learn how to cook and all.
And in 1999, how old were you?
72.
Oh, when did you learn how to drive?
It took me
Well, because she needed a car to do this job.
It took me forever. I had a permit for about 10 years. My husband was in no hurry to teach me. So finally I took a driver's course. I got my permit and I got my license. And I could drive to Bath and around Corning. I'm still not a good driver. I stay on the highway or close by.
How old were you when you got your license?
About 57, 58, maybe older. All of my friends had license but me.
Who are your friends around the neighborhood now?
Well, Jackie Curry, my longtime Tuskegee friend, is my friend. And my friend down the street who was my babysitter, Jean Kephart. And another friend that lived on the corner, Freddie Turchiff. We're all close. And there's Cleo Watkins. And there's Thelma Scott. And I didn't know Thelma at Tuskegee. She came a couple years after I had left. But we're all friends. And we try to stay in touch, one with another.
Who did Jean babysit for? Chantal?
And Valerie. And there's Mrs. Mathis that lived down the street. I see her occasionally. So I have quite a few friends. And the girls I met through Girl Scouts and like that. And my friends at church. The children of the people that were raised on this street. Yeah.
Do you have any, memories of these new local friends?
Of new friends?
Oh, no, I mean just the people in the neighborhood. The ones you just talked about. Something specific.
Well, Jean and I don't know how we became friends because really close. We've always been tight. And she'll call and say, Odessa, would you like to go here with me? And I like to go, and she likes to drive. And so we get in the car and go. Or I'm going grocery shopping. You want to go? And we go. And we just take our time and go out and have something to eat and just enjoy the day. Yes. And Freddie is the same way. Freddie likes to sew. And Freddie taught me how to make a quilt. And then I have a friend up in Dundee that comes down to see me. And another friend I met through my work that we stay in touch. And so I try to just stay in touch with people.
Yeah, you made a quilt for me, and I still have it.
Oh, you better keep it.
Oh, I will. I'm very, very sentimental, unlike Mommy. She throws everything out, but I'm hanging on to it.
Yes, because you know something? After I finished that quilt, I said, I'm not going to give it to Hannon. And I had made it for you in the beginning, and I said, no, this is for Hannon. She'll have it as long as she takes care of it.
She takes good care of it.
I do.
Good.
Although I think at one point when I was younger, I spilled a bottle of glow-in-the-dark paint on it.
Oh, that's
so there's
okay.
one little section that glows whenever
That's
you turn out the
okay.
light. Did you make quilts for any of your other grandchildren?
Only for Callie, Callister. I made hers was a crib quilt, and then yours was next. And Freddie wants me to get started again because she quilts all the time, and her quilts would take first prize at the fair.
Why don't you talk about the flood of Hurricane Agnes?
Well, that was 72 when the Hurricane Agnes came through here.
This is the 40th anniversary
Yes.
of the flood.
And devastated this community. But we were blessed because we lived on a hill. We were cut off, but we didn't go through the waters like a lot of families did. But
Water came up to the color line.
My friend Jean Kephart, she was babysitting for Chantel at the time. So at the store the day before, somebody said, what you gonna do if the water comes up? She said, I'm going to Charlie McGrady's house. And the next morning, I looked out my window, there was Jean and her family. And the water had come to her house. And she said, I said, come on in. And they came in. And then I walked back down the hill with her and saw her porch go. And it was a strange feeling. So we're really blood sisters all the way. All the way.